Good afternoon. Let me start by saying, on behalf of the 2 million members and supporters of the Human Rights Campaign across this country, we're heartbroken for the victims of this despicable attack, and we weep for their families and their loved ones. I'd also like to specifically thank the FBI, the Orlando Police Department, and all first responders, as well as Mayor Buddy Dyer and the greater Orlando community, all of whom worked together so quickly and so bravely to save as many lives as possible. I also want to thank President Obama for offering the support of this administration and to the entire investigation, and his offer of support to the entire LGBTQ community. What happened early this morning in Orlando has shaken our nation. And for LGBT people across the country, this heinous attack hits especially close to home. Even though America has made tremendous progress for equality, the truth is there are still communities, far too many communities all across this country, where LGBT people don't always feel comfortable or even safe living openly as themselves. Places like Pulse Nightclub feel like safe havens where people go to get away from whatever judgment or discrimination or even violence that plagues them in their daily lives, and to be their true and authentic selves, even if only for a few hours. To think of these innocent people, some of them just kids, being attacked somewhere that might have been the only place on earth they felt free or even safe. It breaks our hearts. Across the United States and around the world, people are celebrating LGBT Pride this month. Let us remember why the very first Pride March was ever even held: to fight back against those who sought to keep us down, keep us closeted, and keep us afraid. So while today is a day of mourning in the wake of this tragedy, I say to LGBTQ people living in every corner of this country and around the globe, continue to be bold, be loved, and be proud. But right now, there are mothers and fathers, spouses and partners, siblings and friends who aren't thinking about any of that. They're simply wishing they had just one more moment to say, "I love you." During this, their darkest hour, we as a nation must be their strength. We must be their comfort. And we must promise that the memory of those they lost will never, ever fade. Love really does conquer hate. And today I pray for love to also conquer sorrow. And let's not forget that what made this hate so deadly is that it's still far too easy for dangerous people to get their hands on guns in this country. In the days to come, there will be time to discuss what could have led to or even prevented this revolting tragedy. But let's get one thing clear. And this is what disgusts me the most about this tragedy. The maniac who did this was somehow conditioned to believe that LGBTQ people deserve to be massacred and that they are less than in this society. And he wasn't just hearing these messages from a faraway terrorist organization. He was hearing it from politicians and from radical anti-LGBTQ extremists right here in our own country. Every time we see legislation that puts a target on the back of LGBT people, every time we hear a preacher that spews hate from the pulpit, every time a county clerk says that acknowledging our relationships violates her religious beliefs, it sends a signal that LGBT people should be treated differently and that we are less than. That is deeply ingrained in the hate and the bigotry that motivates such tragedy in this country, and together, that's what we must defeat. Because at the end of the day, the same hatred that motivated this attack in Orlando is the same hatred that killed Matthew Shepard so many years ago, and the same hatred behind these killings is the same hatred that was behind the killings at Emmanuel Church in Charleston or the St. Tipple in Wisconsin. And it's the same hate that together, in coalition, we must all continue to fight each and every day. I'd now like to turn things over to Mara Kiesling, the Executive Director of the National Center for Transgender Equality. Chad Griffin.
Hello, my name is Mara Kiesling, and I'm the Executive Director of the National Center for Transgender Equality. Today I am both heartbroken and furious. We do not yet know if any or how many of the victims were transgender. We know that this was a club that was much frequented by transgender folks, and these are kids. That's, it's young adults and kids who go to nightclubs. And I am just furious that once again we have another mass shooting, this now apparently the worst mass shooting in American history. And it comes at a time when LGBT people, and particularly transgender people, are traumatized by the hate that's coming at them from politicians, the hate that's coming at them from anti-extremist groups, from extremist ministers. We have had more than a dozen transgender people murdered so far this year. And the hate, as Chad said, that is doing this is the same hate that caused violence and death at the Sikh temple in Wisconsin, at Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston. And we need to get to the point where all of us get together and say, when they come for anybody, we will speak out. We want them to come for us first. When they come for Muslims, they have to come for us first. When they come for immigrants, they have to come for us first. This is hate aimed at all of us. It is extremism aimed at all of us. And while there is no direct link between the kind of hate being spewed by politicians, by extremist right-wing groups, by extremist ministers, there can be no mistake that they are raising the heat against us. They are trying to make us scared, and they are going to cause people who aren't thinking straight to come after us. But we are going to be strong. We are going to be together, and we are going to win. And when I say we are going to be together, I mean it has to be all of us. It has to be all of us. We have to stand up when this happens at Planned Parenthood. We have to stand up when it happens to a black church in Charleston. We have to stand up every time together against this kind of extremism, against this kind of violence. And as an LGBT leader, I want to say something that many of us have been saying for some time. We can no longer have an effective or moral LGBT movement unless it is also an anti-racism movement, an anti-poverty movement, a pro-immigrant movement, a pro-disability rights movement, a pro-worker movement, and a pro-women's movement. There are people who want to come for all of us. We have to be standing there together. We have to be there with everybody in Orlando who needs us right now. Everybody is in our thoughts. And thank you very much. I'd like to introduce you next to Cornell William Brooks, the President and CEO of the NAACP. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the millions of members and supporters of the NAACP, I want to assert clearly that we stand shoulder to shoulder, heart to heart, hand in hand with our brothers and sisters in the LGBTQ community. Make no mistake, when you violate, when you desecrate, when you assassinate the humanity of any of us, it is a civil rights issue at the top of the NAACP's agenda. This moment that we find ourselves in is a trying hour in the midst of this imperfect union, this American democracy. And yet in this hour, we're reminded that this is the holy month of Ramadan. This is Gay Pride Month. This is nearly to the day 1 year after 9 students of Scripture were assassinated in a church. And yes, for many of us, even this Methodist preacher, this is the Sabbath day. And when you take the lives of God's children on the Sabbath day, people of every faith, of every ethnicity, of every hue have to stand up and take notice and speak out. It is just that clear. This is a moment in which we have to be clear, our hearts are extended to every mother, every father, every brother, every sister, every aunt, every uncle, every grandmother, every grandfather who lost a child, a loved one in a nightclub. A nightclub that was known to be a place where people gathered for friendship and fellowship, to sing and dance, but also a nightclub that spoke out and spoke up for the rights of God's children. So we stand together, being very clear that we must create concentric circles of empathy and compassion. Yes, this is a trying hour. Yes, this is a difficult hour, but we find ourselves in the midst of a season of love. And we love one another so much that we're willing to stand up for one another's rights. We're willing to call for sensible, thoughtful gun control. And yes, whether or not this crime is called a homophobic act of terrorism, whether it's called a generic act of terrorism, or it's called a hate crime, whatever it is a crime and a violation against our values as Americans. And as such, we have to be clear, we have to be strong, and we have to demonstrate to the entire world our resolve. We will not allow the forces of hate to take down our citizens. We will not allow our values to be violated, because we are one family, one nation, under God, who loves us all, whom we all love in different ways, but we stand together as God's children.
Thank you, Cornell, and thank you, Chad. It is an honor to stand with such a distinguished group of civil rights leaders, and we are united in our grief and our condemnation. My name is Janet Murguia. I'm President and CEO of the National Council of La Raza. And on behalf of the largest Hispanic civil rights and advocacy organization in the United States, I want to extend the deepest condolences from the NCLR familia, the more than 500,000 Hispanics who call Orlando home, and the entire Latino community nationwide, to the victims of this horrific tragedy. Our thoughts and prayers are with them. As we know, this was an act of terror and an act of hate. Orlando is rightly proud of its rich diversity and its reputation as a welcoming community, especially for its large and growing Latino and LGBT communities. Those communities came together last evening at the club's weekly Latin night. But that night of celebration and of unity was shattered by senseless, baseless, and inexcusable hatred. We must condemn, and we must also come together. We stand in solidarity with the LGBTQ community to help reassure our fellow Americans that they need not worry about living their lives or fear being open about who they are. We are saddened, but we are also strengthened in that unity. In the days ahead, we will learn the names of those who lost their lives and have had their lives irrevocably changed by last night's event. We know with a heavy heart that many of these victims are beloved members of our community. NCLR and its affiliates stand ready to help the victims and their families, because their pain is our pain. And it is in unity that we hope that we can come together, strengthened to reaffirm our American values. And we know this act was counter and contrary to those values that we hold dear. Thank you very much. I'd like to now ask Sharon Letterman Hicks, Executive Director of the National Black Justice Coalition, to come forward.
Good afternoon. Hate cannot win. Hate won't win. I am Sharon Letterman Hicks, the Executive Director and CEO of the National Black Justice Coalition. We're the national civil rights group focused on the intersection of racial justice and LGBT equality. This is Pride Month, for the LGBT community, a time to celebrate and rejoice about living our authentic lives. Hate will not win. We just gathered this weekend right here at HRC with the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans to celebrate our LGBTQ youth on building an empowered generation by calling on our families and community to stand in solidarity with the next generation of LGBTQ leaders. Hate must not win. As a Floridian, my heart is broken for the city of Orlando and my entire state. Last night, as Janet just stated, was Latin night at Pulse. As an Afro-Latina, I am personally impacted by not knowing if any of my family, friends, or members of my organization that may have been in the club last night. I pray and call for strength for the victims and families as they mourn, as they heal, as they try to put this in some type of perspective. There are so many that were directly and indirectly impacted by this tragedy. Hate will not win.
I'm Judith Lichtman, and I'm here speaking on behalf of the National Partnership for Women and Families and the Leadership Conference for Civil and Human Rights, a coalition of over 200 civil rights and human rights organizations. I, too, am here to speak against hate and to stand not only in solidarity with different communities, because my heartfelt position is that we are all one. I'm going to read an excerpt of a very short, important poem written by a Lutheran minister during the Holocaust. And he said, "First they came for the socialists and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews and I didn't speak out because I wasn't Jewish. And then they came for me and there was no one left to speak out." I think these words speak for themselves. We speak to you today with one voice in great pain against hatred.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Brenda Abdalal of Muslim Advocates. It's with a heavy heart that I am here today to address all of you. We are horrified and saddened by the mass shooting that took place at the Orlando Nightclub this morning. Our thoughts and prayers are with the family and friends of the victims of this despicable act of violence. Our hearts are also with the LGBTQ community in Florida and throughout the United States. The LGBTQ community has stood side by side with the American Muslim community during challenging and difficult times, and we stand together today against hatred, violence, and the demonization of a community. Today, we stand in solidarity with the LGBTQ community. Your grief is our grief. Your outrage is our outrage. We are all one family together. To quote Harvey Milk, the late LGBTQ rights leader who was killed by an act of hate, "Hope will never be silent." This is why it is more important than ever to come together as Americans and focus on what unites us. As a nation, we are only strongest together. As we learn more about this tragedy in the coming days, we will continue to stand together with our LGBTQ community, along with our partners across all faiths and communities. Thank you.
Hi everyone, Jorge Amaro with the National LGBTQ Task Force. On behalf of the National LGBTQ Task Force, we are deeply shocked and heartbroken by the appalling act of violence against the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer community and our friends. Last night, as the LGBTQ community took part in LGBTQ Pride Month celebrations all across the country, 50 of our LGBTQ brothers and sisters, their lives were taken. Our thoughts and our prayers are with the family and friends of those who have lost their loved ones and who were also injured. While the motive behind this mass shooting still remains unclear, let's be quite clear. Our resolve to live openly, proudly, and genuinely remains completely undiminished. Now is the time for the whole nation to stand together against violence, against hatred, and against extremism of any kind. We must also resist and renounce any and all efforts to demonize any community of faith. Words are weapon, and now is time for elected leaders to show real leadership by doing all they can to create an America free from gun violence and hate crimes. Our leaders must also act to eliminate all forms of discrimination that prevent LGBTQ people from helping our brothers and sisters in this time of need, such as donating blood. This is a national tragedy, and there are no words that can diminish the unbearable pain and heartache that everyone feels. What we can do is redouble our efforts for full, lived freedom, justice, and equality for LGBTQ people and for everyone. Breve información en español también. En nombre del National LGBTQ Task Force, deseamos expresar nuestro profundo conmoción, aflijo por este acto atroz de la violencia contra la comunidad lesbiana, gay, bisexual y transgénero, y nuestros amigos. Ayer por la noche, mientras la comunidad LGBT participaba en la celebración del mes de orgullo LGBT por todo el país, en Washington y en Los Ángeles, más de 50 de nuestros hermanos y hermanas LGBT perdieron la vida. Nuestros pensamientos y oraciones están con las familias, a la comunidad de Orlando y su familia y amigos y seres queridos que fueron heridos y fallecieron anoche. Mientras que el motivo detrás de este tiroteo masivo sigue siendo investigado, debemos ser claros. Nuestra determinación de vivir abiertamente con orgullo no ha sido disminuido. Ahora es el momento para toda la nación de permanecer unidos contra la violencia, contra el odio y contra el extremismo de cualquier tipo. También hay que resistir y renunciar cualquier y todo esfuerzo de demonizar a comunidades enteras de fe. Las palabras son unas armas y ahora es el momento para que nuestros líderes elegidos demuestren el liderazgo real, haciendo todo lo posible para crear un país libre de crímenes y violencia armada y del odio. Nuestros líderes también deben actuar para eliminar toda forma de discriminación que impide a las personas LGBT de ayudar a nuestros hermanos y hermanas en este tiempo de necesidad, tales como la donación de sangre. Esta es una tragedia nacional y no hay palabras que puedan disminuir el dolor y la angustia que todo el mundo siente. Lo que podemos hacer es aumentar nuestros esfuerzos para la plena libertad, la justicia e igualdad para todas las personas LGBT y para todo el mundo. Gracias.
Hi, Maria Teresa Kumar with Voto Latino. Voto Latino is here today for a very simple reason. That who you love does not know race, does not know gender, and does not know religion. We are in solidarity today with the LGBT community because they are our brothers and sisters. They are our loved ones. And this tragedy impacts not just them, but all of us. We are in a very trying moment in our history today in America. With increased diversity, there seems to be increased violence that seems to be sanctioned by those in power. It has to stop, because there's more of us who believe in breaking down those silos. There's more of us, in breaking down those silos, that we recognize that those silos do not know religion, they do not know love, they do not know race, but they recognize that the more barriers that are put between us, the more barriers that are put between our causes and our issues, it is incredibly difficult for us to unify as one America. So today, for those families that are grieving in Orlando, our hearts are with you, but it won't stop there. We will take this to the very end to ensure that there is a repercussion, not just for the individual, but more importantly for those that are responsible, that allow weapons so easily accessible. Our hearts are there with those individuals and those parents who have lost someone. We have to stop saying that there's not a will. There is a will, and it's clear. We have to ensure that our brighter days are in front of us, as long as we stand strong and know that love does conquer hate. We need to find that courage. Para esas familias ahora que están en Orlando, Voto Latino les manda amor, pero también para que ustedes sepan que estamos con ustedes. La raza, el amor con quien ustedes deciden hablar, la religión, no sabe género ni su orientación. Nosotros estamos con ustedes en solidaridad. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you, Chad.
Thank you all very much for coming out. Out of respect for the press conference that's about to start in Orlando, we're going to conclude the event and we can all be available separately for questions. Thank you.